Welcome back to Flyers Tuning. We're here with the SubaNews for the first full week of April 2026. Lots to talk about here. Super GT race, first race of the season is this weekend. Olympus Rally is coming up next weekend, and the STI Market. Let's get into it, but before we do, we just want to say make sure you like, subscribe, hit that hype button if you see it. We greatly appreciate your support. That's what lets us keep coming back to make this content for you. Okay, first up, Super GT race. The first race of the season is this weekend. In fact, we're recording this on Friday, so qualifying is probably tonight, our time, and then the race is probably going to be tomorrow night. Hopefully the whole race is going to be available on YouTube, but I'm sure that there's going to be lots of highlights there. Here's the two things that I want you to check out, the two things that I'm going to be watching in the Super GT race. First and foremost, watch the stands. What we've noticed in going back and starting to follow the BRZ GT300 cars, how much fan support there is for this car, for the team. You're probably going to see a lot of people in the stands wearing Subaru garb. It's pretty cool to see the outflow of support for Subaru competing here. The second thing is, look at all the cars that Subaru is competing with. This is basically a homologated GT3 class, so they're competing against a lot of homologated GT3 race cars like Porsche 911R GT3 Evo, Hurricane GT3, Lexus LC500 GT3, the Nissan GTR GT3 race car, BMW M4 GT3 race car, Ferrari 296 GT3, AMG GT GT3. Full factory-built GT3 race cars. This is what Subaru is competing against in this GT300 class. Let's see how they do. Let's see what it sounds like. Think about what that means. There's obviously we think Subaru should now put the BRZ to this highest pinnacle of performance, and a big reason for that is because the kind of cars that Subaru is competing with the BRZ. The most straight line comparison here is the Nissan GTR. There's no question that the GTR is the pinnacle of performance for Nissan. Well, that's now what Subaru is putting the BRZ up against. Same goes for the Ferrari 296, the BMW M4. These very high level of production race cars that Subaru is now pitting the BRZ against. Yes, the chassis makes the most sense to compete in this series with them. But this is where, it seems like this really is the pinnacle of performance for Subaru, so the BRZ needs to hold that role in the line. And this is where we think that it makes sense. Like if Subaru can build a car to compete with these kind of cars, they should make a production version. If they can compete on the racetrack, they should be able to compete in the showroom as well and make this technology and this kind of car available to us. That's what gets us excited. Imagine if Subaru could make their equivalent of the Nissan GTR. Well, apparently it should be the BRZ because the BRZ is what's competing with the GTR. This is why we made our shirt, the BRZ GT3 checklist. We're trying to make miracles happen. All of you guys that have bought them, bought the cups, whatever, you're trying to make the miracles happen too. If you pick one up, make sure you tag Subaru in it. Let them know that we're following the car and we're interested in it. Lots to get excited about there. Hopefully the race is good for the team. Next, let's talk about the Olympus Rally, which is coming up next weekend. It's going to be a really good event. The Flyers Tuning Rally team is headed out there. We're hoping to have a good event and a good finish. But there's a lot of interesting things that are percolating as the race gets close. Namely that Brendon Semenuk is entered, not in a Subaru, in a Ford Fiesta R2 because Jari-Matti Latvala, WRC driver, has I think 16 or 18 WRC wins. He's coming out to compete in the GR Corolla alongside Seth Quintero. The guess is that Brendon Semenuk wants to see how he stacks up against WRC driver. It's going to be really interesting to follow. Of course, Pastrana is going to be there in the limited four-wheel drive car. Also going to be really interesting to see where Pastrana stacks up between all this stiff competition. It looks like this event is going to be stacked with fast cars, drivers. It's going to be really exciting. We're really glad that we're entered and we're going to be able to race. We want to see how it all plays out. So make sure you keep the Olympus Rally on your calendar for next weekend. All right, last, STI Market. This has been a talking point around the shop, and I think it's worth mentioning here. It's very interesting because the last STI in the US market was 2021. As soon as the STI was discontinued, prices seem to spike. They're not spiking any longer. In fact, quite the opposite, it would seem. Even if you look at the 2021 STIs, you can find good examples with relatively low mileage in the very high 20s or low 30s, which is kind of surprising. And in fact, the VA STIs, there's a lot of options in the low to mid 20s even with fairly low miles. You get the high mileage ones. We saw one on Cars and Bids that ended for $10,000, which is kind of mind-blowing for an STI. I can't remember STIs going for single digits unless they were really in rough shape. But that's where we're at. Now, GR STIs, they seem to be you have a solid number of options under $20,000. What's interesting though is the GD, probably because of the age and the variance in condition, mileage, modifications, they're all over the place. They're, some of them are single digits, some of them are, mid 20s, just depending on what the condition of the car is. But it does really seem like the STI market is as soft as I can remember it being, especially for that last handful of production years, which is really, really surprising because usually the STIs of all of the cars have held their value. If you look at the 22 and up WRX, oftentimes it looks like you're going to be paying more for 22 and up WRX with low miles compared to a 18, 19, 20, 21 STI. It's interesting. Things have flipped on its head in the STI market. Does this mean it's time to buy one? Or are you going to hold out and wait for the announcement of the STI, see if Subaru announces an STI coming? That is a hard question. Definitely want to know what you think in the comments. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for checking out the Suba News as always. And until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.